Redacted tonight. This is the comedy show where Americans in America covering American news are called foreign agents. You know, they say hindsight is 20/20. Since it's nearly the year 2020, does that mean we'll start learning from our mistakes, or just gonna keep acting like fucking idiots? Anyway, since it's almost the end of the year, that means it's time to go over Project Censored's top 25 most censored stories. Every year, the independent nonprofit Project Censored carefully selects 25 stories that are the most censored in Western media. I'll go through as many as we can get through in the time we have. First up, Facebook has become a tool. Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta keep reading. A tool of U.S. foreign policy. Under the guise of fighting fake news and protecting U.S. democracy from foreign influence, in 2018, social media giant Facebook established partnerships with the Atlantic Council, a NATO-sponsored think tank, and with two U.S. government creations from the Cold War era, the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute. And not only has Facebook been suppressing everything that doesn't fit within a mainstream corporate media talking point box, it was also found to be doing experiments on us, such as seeing whether they can make us depressed. Joke's on you, Zuckerberg. If I'm surfing Facebook looking to see whether my high school girlfriend is married with kids, then I'm already depressed. You're too late, dickhead! Ha-ha! Ha-ha! Next up, the Justice Department has been found to have rules for targeting journalists. A pair of 2015 memos from former Attorney General Eric Holder to the Department of Justice's National Security Division show how the government could use court orders under FISA to monitor the communications of journalists and news organizations. And you see, the corporate media will tell you Donald Trump is dangerous to the media, but in fact, he's just continuing a long-standing move by the ruling elite to undermine and prosecute journalists. But let's be honest, they're not using that power on all journalists. They only need to worry about the ones who aren't doing the bidding of the corporate state. They don't need to spy on Brian Stelter, Brett Baer, and Joy Behar. I mean, Stelter wouldn't know a real story if it kicked him in the balls or the face. Tough to tell the difference. No, that was mean. No, the Justice Department likely only spies on journalists speaking out against war and empire. All 7 of us. Yeah, that's right. All of America's anti-war TV and YouTube hosts sometimes get together to play 3-on-3 basketball. It's a lot of fun. Bet you didn't know Chris Hedges can dunk like a motherfucker. Next up, an alliance of some 500 indigenous groups from 9 countries. The coordinator of the indigenous organizations of the Amazon River Basin is planning to safeguard a sacred corridor of life and culture covering more than 700,000 square miles, an area about the size of Mexico. Come on! Life and culture, who needs them? Here in the U.S., we're doing just fine without life and culture, okay? Just ask the stars of Naked and Afraid. By the way, that show has the hardest working pixelation team in show business. The truth is, the Amazon is under extreme threat, as are countless species of plants and animals not seen anywhere else in the world. These indigenous peoples are the true front lines of the battle to save this planet. And I would go down there right now, except I'm allergic to mosquitoes, all right? When they bite, it gets red and itchy, and I don't like it. Speaking of endangered species, another censored story this year is the Trump administration's assault on the Endangered Species Act. In the 2 years since Trump became president, at least 80 bills seeking to undermine the ESA have been introduced in Congress, and key federal agencies charged with implementing the ESA have proposed revisions to weaken vital elements of it. I find this shocking coming from Donald Trump, an overweight man who's 73 years old, sleeps 4 hours a night, and eats nothing but McDonald's. He himself is an endangered species, all right? He is living on borrowed time, my friends. Not to mention the chemicals he sprays on his face could knock out a mother grizzly that's been separated from her cubs, all right? Honestly, it's a miracle that he's not extinct himself. Well, not a miracle because that's a good thing. Whatever the opposite of a miracle is. A crappy surprise, I don't know, a shitstorm. It is a shitstorm that he's not extinct. But it's not just that the GOP is trying to tear apart the Endangered Species Act. It's also that this is one of the most censored stories because our corporate media doesn't give a shit whether rich assholes destroy the natural world. I mean, look how things are going. A few years from now, we'll be living on a treeless tundra under a black sky discussing which chic new design is all the rage for this year's gas masks. Eating nothing but protein pellets made from crushed up cockroaches and repurposed rain boots and giving the week-long sandstorms cute names like Betsy or Charles so that they seem more friendly. But even then, the corporate media will tell us to focus our anger on China or Russia or Iran. They're the ones who killed all the birds. They're the ones who ate all the fish. They're the ones who made the cockroach pellets more gritty this month. Speaking of roach pellets, let's talk about public school food systems. But this is actually some good news. There are new programs that not only connect school children with local farms, they create jobs and keep money in the community to support on-campus gardens and farm fresh meals. A study in Georgia found that every dollar the program spent, $2 stayed in the state instead of leaving to be invested in large food companies, Yes Magazine reported. Yes Magazine. One of the only periodicals named after what you yell during orgasm. You know, the only others being We, and then for the true patriots, USA Today! I lost 3 girlfriends. But the reason this story is censored is because of corporate interests. Guess which corporations spend massive amounts of money on ads in the mainstream media channels? Coke, Pepsi, Tyson Foods, Nestle, and they own every form of nutritionless, sugar-filled, pre-processed, shipped around the world food stuff filled with feral cat meat and sawdust. I mean, they own it all. So they make money if they're stuffing that shit in your kids' faces. And notice I say your kids and not our kids because you were the one dumb enough to have kids. Okay, don't put that on me. I tried to warn you. I remember all those days I was out on your lawn just like, while you were up with your lady friend yelling, don't do it! Don't do it! It's a trap! It's a trap! Let's move now to a slightly lighter topic, slavery. According to the 2018 Global Slavery Index, an estimated 403,000 people in the United States were living in conditions of modern slavery in 2016, and an estimated 40 million worldwide. 400,000 people in the U.S. alone, and that includes forced labor and forced marriages. And it's amazing, a lot of people don't think of forced marriage as slavery. Are you kidding? Locking someone into a loveless, miserable existence, living with a person they can't stand, where they aren't free to do whatever they want? All right, that's every marriage, but still, forced marriage is worse, all right? You don't get to pick the music. Wow, I went after kids and marriage in the span of 2 minutes. This episode is hell for suburbanites. Anyway, next up, the Israel lobby exposed. Our media doesn't only censor stories because of ad dollars. They also do it because of other kinds of pressure. And that was the case with a censored story we covered earlier on this show. Earlier this year, a documentary film that aimed to expose Israel's covert influence campaign in the United States has been leaked to the media after the government of Qatar pulled it from Al Jazeera, a media outlet Qatar funds. In August 2018, excerpts of the censored documentary were leaked and published by a number of online independent outlets. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're telling me Israel influences U.S. policy? I find that hard to believe. Even though we all know Israel has massive foreign influence campaigns, especially in the U.S., and even though the Democrats claim they want to stop foreign influence, we all know that's bullshit when it comes to Israel. But there's a difference between knowing something and seeing the actual internal proof, the evidence, which is exactly what the suppressed documentary The Lobby exposes. It's kind of like the Washington Post expose that came out this week, in which they revealed thousands of internal government documents showing the U.S. military has no fucking idea what's going on in Afghanistan. And they have no evidence that the longest war in U.S. history will come to an end anytime soon. I mean, we've all known that for a long time, but now we have proof, the actual documents, okay? Furthermore, this is exciting for the Washington Post because it marks their first piece of actual journalism since the O.J. murders. Very exciting. Give them a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. I mean, it's not easy to be consistently a decade or two late with the news. It's not. It takes a lot. The Washington Post couldn't be less informed if they lived inside a 96 Honda Civic that's up on cinder blocks on an Amish farm in the hills of rural Pennsylvania, and they got their daily information from a friendly squirrel, all right? In fact, they'd be more informed because at least the squirrel isn't doing propaganda for the CIA. I mean, he might be. I wouldn't put it past the CIA. Who knows how long it will be until the Washington Post or the New York Times or what have you tells us other important stories, like the fact that 5G wireless has not yet been proven safe for humans and animals. Which brings us to our next most censored story. 5G health concerns. Many of you know 5G is the upcoming version of wireless that will soon be everywhere. As Project Censored says, 5G will require a massive telecommunications network with many more wireless antennas, resulting in greater radio frequency radiation and increased health risks. And even though publications as large as Scientific American have said there's no evidence that 5G is safe, many corporate media outlets have gone to lengths, great lengths, to say 5G is totally fine. Rather than be skeptical, most of these articles about 5G sound as giddy as a fucking schoolgirl, all right? Although I gotta say, as a former schoolgirl, I find that offensive. I really do. Seriously though, why is it only schoolgirls that are called giddy? I feel like schoolboys are giddy sometimes. I mean, you know, when we got a glimpse of a Playboy, or in my case, an X-Men comic, you know, I was definitely giddy when I finally got the tennis shoes that had the groundbreaking air pumps in them, all right? There is no more important advancement in sneaker technology than the pump. I mean, before I pumped up my shoes, I was a slow, chubby, white third grader. But afterwards, I was a slow, chubby, white third grader who seemed slightly more bouncy. Nothing accentuates the pudge like bouncing around. I blame Reebok for my entire childhood trauma. Back to the point. Our media is driving us headlong into possible severe health risks, and yet the New York Times is running with headlines like this: the 5G health hazard that isn't. And lucky for us consumers, the New York Times has no conflict of interest on this topic at all. They are not receiving millions of dollars from any 5G connected corporation. And if they were, I'm sure some television shows would be talking about it. This is the second page of the New York Times from this week. Let's see. Giant 5G ad. Right there, a fourth of a page. Let's go another page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Let's go, one more page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Oh, let's go another page. Giant 1/4 of a page 5G Verizon advertisement. Wow, that guy has some real anger issues. I mean, gotta take it down a notch. Let's get to our final most censored story of the year. The U.S. oil and gas industry has the potential to unleash the largest burst of new carbon emissions in the world through 2050. According to a report from Oil Change International, the report says new U.S. oil and gas development could enable 120 billion tons of new carbon pollution. So while our media has begun covering the climate crisis, they continue to censor certain aspects of it, such as the gigantic investment oil and gas companies have put into continuing our lovely drive off a fucking environmental cliff. You know, it was all fun and games until that, you know. Many of the reports that do address climate just make it all about returning to the Paris Climate Accords, as if we should be immensely proud of a largely meaningless agreement. Celebrating the agreement, that agreement reminds me of a sign I saw the other day outside a dog park. The sign said in large, excited font, "Picking up number 2 makes you number 1. First of all, I was under the impression that number 1 was urine, which doesn't sound like a great reward. But let's assume they mean number 1 as in the tops, the best person on earth. Sure, picking up your dog's shit is better than not. But I think it's hardly making you number 1. You're no Martin Luther King just because you have a turd in a bag. I mean, you're not going to win any trophies for picking it up, but it couldn't hurt. I mean, it couldn't hurt. It's the same with the Paris Climate Accords. Stop acting like it makes you number 1. It's better than not signing it, but at the end of the day, you've still got shit on your hands. These have been some of the most censored stories of the past year. We have to go to a quick break, but we have a lot more. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm still Lee Camp. Continuing with our most censored stories, Big Pharma imperiled billions of lives in developing countries by failing to manufacture 2/3 of desperately needed drugs. And it's no better in developed countries like ours. Despite a record number of FDA approvals for cheaper, generic drugs, pharma company greed has forced thousands of those life-saving drugs to just sit on the shelves for years, unavailable to customers. For more on this, we go to our senior Big Pharma apologist, Natalie McGill. Natalie. I don't know why we keep you on payroll as our apologist, but still. So this is pretty obviously immense greed going on.
No, it's not greed. It's protecting intellectual property through some additional patents. And I think it's only fair these generic drug makers jump through some legal hoops before they're allowed to take someone else's idea and reap all of the benefits. I mean, can you imagine if black people could patent rock and roll? All right, then Elvis Presley would have just been the white guy who plays acoustic guitar at parties, or worse, the ukulele. And I need something stronger than generic drugs to get through that.
Natalie, lawmakers had to make it easier for generics to enter the market so that it would drive down all the costs. A backlog of generics means that millions of Americans are forced to buy crazy expensive brand name medicines.
Yeah, but when it comes to your health, why would you want anything but the brand name? Brand names are how you know whether you're getting quality or crap. That's why I couldn't wait until I was an adult and could buy my own box of Cap'n Crunch after my mom ruined every childhood breakfast by buying boxes of Admiral Jaw Cracker.
Wow, he doesn't even look happy about his own cereal. He looks... And why the hell is he smoking on the front of a kid's cereal box?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's an older box, the Admiral vapes now. But let's not pretend the generic drug makers being sued over patents care any less about making money than the brand name manufacturers. Because though the generic drug makers have to wait, they still benefit because they're paid by the branded companies to stay off the market.
So instead of getting sued, the generic producers get paid to do nothing for years?
It's pretty awesome, isn't it? It's just like being a White House cabinet member. And as long as our unhinged commander-in-chief has the option to afford brand name drugs like Latuda to control his mood swings, then White House staff can keep the gravy train going since generic copies of Latuda won't go on sale until 2023 under the terms of a deal between the makers of the generics and Latuda's manufacturer, Synovian Pharmaceuticals, after Synovian sued for patent infringement.
Okay, am I missing something here? Where's the part that helps patients? I mean, is that in there anywhere? Our government fails to negotiate for lower drug prices because Big Pharma owns our politicians. And the process of how we price drugs is a mystery. And now drug makers use any trick they can to stall generics from entering the market. We're talking about life-saving drugs, not your grandma's secret Christmas time cookie recipe. These need to get out to the people.
Lee, whose playbook do you think Big Pharma took pages from? All right, your grandma knows if she gives you her secret Christmas cookie recipe, you'll have no reason to visit her again. So if you want those cookies, you have to pay the high cost of being asked why you don't have a husband or kids or a real job, and at which point you're less interested in the pursuit of generic drugs and more so the illegal ones.
Natalie McGill, everyone! The UN Climate Conference is in full swing this week in Spain, but some environmentalists are not happy with what's going on there. We sent Redacted correspondent Anders Lee to Spain to get to the bottom of it. He filed this report.
Despite the beautiful views and vibes here in sunny Madrid, thousands of demonstrators gathered on Friday to protest their respective governments' inaction on climate change. But what the protesters clearly don't understand is that just down the road, hundreds of world leaders are meeting for the COP25 UN Climate Summit. This is a chance for the globe's best, brightest, and richest to put their heads together and come up with some ingenuitive solutions for the environment. And it's really hard for them to concentrate when there's angry people outside yelling about injustice against polar bears or whatever. That's actually why the summit had to change locations this year after its original host city, Santiago, Chile, got a noise complaint. But despite their defiant attitudes, environmentalists have been given a chance to participate in the conference. Last Thursday, during a meeting organized by the always eco-friendly International Emissions Trading Association, several activists stood up, covered their ears, and walked out. Now, why would you do that? I know that some people need to do the hands over ears thing to go to their oceanside thinky place, but if they were doing it to ignore the other people in the room, then that's downright rude. Who are they shunning anyway?
We don't think that polluters like Shell, like BP and like Chevron should be at the COP influencing the climate talks here. So we stood up, we covered our ears and we walked out of the room to make a point to say that Shell shouldn't be at the COP, Chevron shouldn't be at the COP, BP shouldn't be at the COP. They're wrecking our climate.
Big polluters, okay, but how do you know what they were going to say? Maybe if the activists had kept an open mind and listened, they would have heard these companies offer to hand their resources over to the public and turn themselves in for knowingly distributing products that are destroying the ecosystem. I assume that's what they said. Why else would they be at a climate change summit?
In fact, the biggest polluters are sponsoring these climate talks, from fossil fuel companies to the banks that finance them, as well as many others like airlines. And so, I mean, what we saw is, it's not just the biggest polluters who are using this for huge greenwashing opportunities. You'll see their logos all over the COP, but they're also using this to influence the talks themselves, to gain access.
Well, look, someone's got to sponsor this thing. Might as well be the people who created this whole climate change situation. Without these companies, we wouldn't be sharing our wonderful last moments as a species here together. Besides, these things are expensive. Do you have any idea how much money is needed to set up Emmanuel Macron's hotel room every year? We're talking champagne fountains, diamond-encrusted cigarette holders, a portrait sculpted out of ripe avocados. The Spanish government has said it is seeking corporate sponsors because it doesn't have the funds itself to host the event. But a closer look reveals each year the Spanish government gives fossil fuel electricity companies 470 million euro in subsidies. Yes, so they can throw big events like the COP conference. Spending that money on renewable energy sources is the easy way out. It's much more effective in the long run if we invest in our ecosystem of ideas. It's important to remember that most of these countries have already signed on to the Paris Climate Accords. They're locked into meeting those targets one way or another. It's just a matter of which way they pick. And at this year's COP summit, they're looking at the Paris Agreement's Article 6 for guidance. Article 6 includes carbon markets as one of the means of implementing the Paris Agreement. Corporations have lobbied heavily to make this article's carbon trading scheme devoid of limits or protections. If they get their way, the Paris Agreement would usher in a regime under which global North governments are able to pay their way out of their obligations to cut emissions and saddle the global South to deal with those cuts instead. Someone's got to do it. What, are we going to ask these companies to cut back instead? They just paid for a whole conference, and it's catered. Reporting from Madrid, I'm Anders Lee for Redacted Tonight.
Here are your headlines from the future. Next week, you'll read, while Senate busy with impeachment hearings, U.S. war crimes accidentally slipped a 5-year low. Damn it. And 2 days from now, Hot Mike catches Trump saying he grabs Democrats by the pussy, and because he's a celebrity, they let him do it. That's our show, but hold on. My new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines, is now available for pre-order at leecampbook.com. There's a limited number of signed copies available, so grab that, and don't forget to join our email list by texting the word redacted to 33777. It's totally free. Okay, now go. Until next time, good night, and keep fighting. Thank you, guys.